everybody. Welcome to the Middle Grades Conversations webinar number 4. Today, we're going to be exploring issues of social justice, equity, and anti-racism. Before our contributors introduce themselves, I'd just like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative for supporting this work. I'd also like to thank Up for Learning, who's partnering with many of the schools, and also the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. Again, thank you for joining us. I know it's a very busy time of year, and if we could have our contributors introduce themselves, that would be awesome. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a program director at Up for Learning. Happy to be here. Pass it to Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Rivers. I'm a middle school teacher at Brattleboro Area Middle School.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Howell. I also do programming at Up for Learning.
Hi, everyone. Kevin Peely Hunt. I'm a 5/8 teacher in Swift House at Williston Central School.
Hi there, Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities to 7th and 8th graders at Shelburne Community School.
And my name is Don Taylor. I teach sustainability at Main Street Middle School to grades 5 through 8. And our first question, over the last probably few weeks or a month, I've been feeling a little bit heavy in terms of like still kind of feeling where are we in terms of coming out of the pandemic, and how are people feeling and how are my colleagues feeling? We've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years. How are we looking out for our colleagues and how are folks doing? And I just wanted to get a general check-in and hear how folks are doing in their current sort of learning community. How are you feeling? And what's the tone and tenor of how students, colleagues, families, and communities are doing at where we are now? Okay, Katie?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think specifically along the topic of anti-racism, it feels like a lot of schools are at this point where they're really ready to engage with the work. That's what it feels like on my end, being able to work with a lot of different communities. And whether it's through the equity lens or the restorative practice lens or the actively just seeking anti-racism work, I think that has been really dynamic as working at this critical space where youth and adult teams are trying to create this anti-racist change together. So it feels like the pandemic or just where we are right now, I really feel like the energy and momentum around this anti-racism work, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Wow, I wish I was there. Just we're not experiencing that same uplifting thing. So right now, medical issues are really paramount for many of us in school. COVID is not the only thing that's hitting us right now. A lot of upper respiratory illnesses are running through the building, and so our classes are maybe between a half and 2/3 full, and the idea of coalescing over any issue other than getting along, and it is challenging for us right now. So I think our staff is doing a lot of good work, and we do have a very active diversity equity committee that is really spearheading a lot of work with the adults, and that is working its way into the classrooms because our attitudes are what we teach. And so the changes are happening. I think they're happening at that level. And so there hasn't been a bigger movement than that at this point in our area. Again, we're just really struggling with having staff and then having a critical mass of students to work with, and then trying to move right now.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I would say it is interesting working in a lot of different schools because every school is a little bit different. I feel like Katie, I do feel this energy around anti-racism work in the schools that I'm currently working with. A lot of the schools I'm currently working with, Winooski and Hunt Middle School, Burlington High School, we're looking for Hunt and Burlington, we're looking at racial and ethnic disparities in the discipline data. That's a project that I'm working on right now. And it is, it can be really tough to look at this data, especially with youth who are, they're right in the thick of it and they're looking at these numbers and they're saying like, I know who that is. I know this might be numbers on a page to you, but like this is our life. So it can be hard, but I also am inspired and just the need being expressed by youth to do this work is just so loud and clear. Sometimes, and I think most of the time, the youth are ahead of the adults in their willingness to go there and have hard conversations. So yeah, right in the thick of it with a lot of the schools I'm working with right now, and do feel a lot of energy around it, particularly in Chittenden County.
Yeah, we've I think just like other teams and other schools, like just definitely feeling the impact of COVID, I think on our kids' social levels. One of my colleagues who works on the therapeutic team in my building, he was talking to me one day. He's like, it just feels like the kids forgot how to be, just that. And I was like, yeah, like that gets it. It's I think we feel a lot with our 7th and 8th graders right now. I'm on a 5-8 team, but just like, I don't know, it's like almost like a lack of empathy a little bit, and just this kind of inability to have some self-awareness. We're doing so much work in advisory with the Castle 5 framework, and like really having those be like the staples of our themes throughout the school year, which is good to have those conversations. But it's funny where we're like within advisory talking about self-awareness and like having respect and things like that, and like while we're having these conversations, like it's like kids have to talk louder to talk over us so they can continue their conversations. I'm like, man, like what's going on? This is like we're halfway through the school year at this point and still having to have these reminders, and they act so surprised if you're like give them a reminder about not talking over you if you're just trying to share. And we're definitely not a team that's like lecture based by any means, and it feels like, all right guys, I just need like 3 minutes just to instruct or go over something kind of critical so you know what we're doing. And it's like they're just unable to give that to us. And we feel on our team like we're all exhausted from it and exhausted from having those conversations again and again and again. But it's the work that we do, and it's important, and bringing that awareness to the kids is huge. And I think it reminds me of how lucky I am to be on a team, because I think we've all had the conversation too of, we feel like if we didn't have each other, this would be a really hard year to say, yeah, I want to continue doing this. Like I don't know how teachers in a silo are doing it right now, because we love each other and have an amazing connection as a team. We're like truly a family and operate as one, and it's we definitely have to lean on each other. Like Joe mentioned too, with the staff shortages. I've been out with paternity leave, and it's like I was talking to Don before we came on, like I don't know who my sub is. I don't know if I'm going to have a sub. And then it makes me feel badly because that means my team has to take on these extra responsibilities, or potentially might like dole out my kids, which makes class sizes, 30, 35 students in a class, and it's not sustainable. And that wears on you too. So I think, we're feeling it for sure, but very grateful to have each other. So I'm lucky to be a part of a team right now.
Thanks, Kev. I can't wait to meet that baby. So for me, I guess I think I'm with you. I'm just with the exhaustion. I just feel I feel like on our team, we're just sort of dragging ourselves into this break. It seems like Thanksgiving was lovely, but it instead of coming back sort of refreshed, it's like we just doubled down on the exhaustion front. And similarly, the behaviors that we're continuing to see, the the classroom practices that, you know, just the respect or the practice of being able to sit and listen, you know, or just being able to get through like the simple 3 minutes. Here's 3 things I need you to do. Take out your notebook. No, you know, voices off, right? Like it just takes so much effort sometimes. And so we're helping them to practice, right? We have to help them to practice to like being curious and engaged and compassionate and empathetic. And that means that, especially because we want to have these conversations around difficult conversations around race or ethnicity, or we're going to do something with the most costly journey when we come back in January. And I am a little concerned. I'm feeling the need to be very explicit about those conversations because I just feel I need to protect, right? Or I need to, I don't know. So I don't not want to do it. I want to do it. And I also realize the work that's going to go into it. So looking forward to next week. Maybe a snow day tomorrow. We'll see.
We just got the
You
call.
can't
Meg.
say stuff like that, Meg,
Got one.
without knocking on
Jenny County.
wood somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'm all around it. I'm all around it.
So, well, thank you so much for your comments. I think we got right into the heart of the conversation a little bit faster than I imagined, because I think it's right there for many of us. So many of these issues. And one of the things that, oh yeah, here we go. Yay. I'll be driving to work while you guys are just rolling out of bed. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Anyway, so one of the things I think that we need to acknowledge, I was talking to somebody about our subject tonight, is just our positionality, so, meaning that, you know, we're all sort of white. Yeah, I think we all identify as white. We're all sort of, as teachers, we kind of fit into a certain socioeconomic place, college educated. And so just acknowledging that, I think, is really important, and the privileges and biases that come with that. But Dina Simmons, who's a very well-known and respected social emotional learning and anti-racist educator, says that educators have an obligation to confront the harm of racism. And she has kind of 5 key points that she makes. And one of them is this idea of engaging in vigilant self-awareness. So asking questions about what we're doing and seeing the biases that we may have and the privileges that we may influence how we're reacting to the kids in the classroom. And I'm walking on this sort of this midline, and I'm really struggling with where I should fall on it. And the midline is, as many of you have mentioned, sort of this idea of expectations for students and behaviors, and how can we have a learning community that's positive and supportive, but at the same time, sort of make sure that everybody is on board with our expectations, right? So we have a pretty strongly project-based learning environment, but I'm still confronting issues of when I do have to instruct. I have kids who may not have the skills, or might be talking, or might not be paying attention. And so you get on them, as you would, and that's kind of the classroom management. But at the same time, I'm asking myself, is this sort of a white supremacist, everybody's in order, everybody's being compliant? Is that what I'm doing as well? And so it's this kind of midline. And recently I've seen some performances by students where other students were distracting or were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And then you're kind of thinking, do these kids need like more discipline? And is that sort of the white supremacist, you know, organized, compliant type thing? And it's really a struggle for me right now. And I am trying to figure out, like, the way I was raised is obviously, as I just mentioned, it's a function of, you know, my culture and being white and male and all these different things. And am I asking kids to do something that I shouldn't be doing? Or so when Simmons talks about this idea of vigilant self-awareness, it's not only how am I treating kids, but then you take that a step further. What are kids who may not be white experiencing in my classroom, and what kind of expectations should I set for all kids? And I think it's really, for me, it's confusing. And this is why I enjoy these conversations so much, is it gives me different perspectives, but it's also, as Meg said, it can be exhausting, right? Like, what's the right thing to do? And is my administration supporting me in what I'm doing, or do they have a different expectation? And then when you start thinking about what Christy's talking about the data, years ago, I did a equity survey on like how kids were getting disciplined for being tardy and being late. And it turns out that the majority of kids who were getting punished were either on a plan or they were also non-white. And if you look at the data, it was incredibly stark and also really disturbing. And so it's just, again, that's where my exhaustion comes in. How am I supposed to operate on the one hand, and on the other, acknowledge all these things that are happening and how they could be doing harm to kids? And so for me, that's kind of where I am sort of right now. And I guess just to kind of take the next question, I also think about most of us have a lot of experience in the classroom or a lot of experience with what we're doing. And I'm thinking about, young teachers or new teachers and what they might be dealing with and experiencing. And I guess it's kind of a nuts and bolts question, but what do you do in your practice, or what are some of the steps you employ in your practice right now to think about social justice or equity or anti-racism, or some of the biases that you might bring to the table? And like, what might that look like in your work, and when you're dealing with different schools like Katie and Christy, or where you're dealing with different kids? And so we'll go back to Katie on that. Just kind of, what are the tools or what are the practices that you employ when you think about these topics?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and it's funny to be the first in the rotation because I tend to be a listener first and foremost, but it's good practice for me. I think the first thing that's coming to mind, and it's a little bit off of what you were talking about, Dawn, when I was doing my master's degree in leadership for sustainability through UVM, I was teaching in a classroom, and I started to keep track of the characteristics of white supremacy culture and when they showed up in my own practice. And so I started this data sheet for myself around, and I don't know if you're familiar with Tema Okun's work. I'll pop it in the chat in a second. But these characteristics of white supremacy culture, and when I recognize myself enacting them, and then I would create like a plan for next time around or just step one, awareness. And then step two, sometimes if I got to it, I would create like a plan for how to engage this moment next time. So I love what you said about, what was it? Vigilant self-awareness, because I think that was exactly what that practice was. And it started to really bring those moments to my critical awareness, to a place where I felt like I actually could interrupt and disrupt some of these cultural conditionings that I had for so long in my teaching and leadership practice, and start to combat them. And again, like sometimes, the data that we look at with teams, like what Christy said earlier, the youth are so engaged to like make the change and do it. But it's hard to make data change when it's within an entire system. But this practice of doing it for myself was really eye-opening, because that is the place where I have a lot of influence to make change. So if I'm noticing perfectionist tendencies coming up in my interaction with a student, what could I do to combat that and try something different next time? So I will pop Tema Okun's work in the chat, but that is the first practice that's come up, and I've actually have returned to that several times, not as consistently as I did it for like 3 months in a row every day, but sometimes when I feel myself slipping, I will return to that practice, and it's really helpful. I'll pass.
I think choice is probably the one I'll hang my hat on, giving the young people choice in where they're going and what they're studying and the way they're going to present that information. So giving them menus, giving them opportunities to take their interests where they want to go. That it allows me to have them work on the skills that I think are important, but it also gives them an opportunity to learn the things they would like to learn and spend the time in areas that are their interests. And that often brings about topics that I learn about as well. And so of practices that have helped, that's a big one. I know it's no longer me saying these are the important things. You know, these might be the important themes, but how you chase those themes is a different kettle of fish, really.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think the key word for me is humility and knowing there's so much I don't know. And just what you spoke to, Don, of the positionality, you know, coming into a school as a white woman and having these conversations with faculty of color, with students of color, and just really, just being very humble and being very open and listening. I've been really fortunate to take part in a series called Listening for Justice that Up for Learning has partnered with an organization or a company, I guess. It's a consulting company in Atlanta. And every week for the past 6 weeks, I think, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, we've had Monday and Friday conversations with people in Atlanta. So some of the facilitators from the consulting company, and then youth from Atlanta middle schools, and then youth from Vermont schools, and just having conversations. And each week there's a topic and we zoom in, and there's a person who zooms in from Hong Kong, and we have people from all over. And it's just the stories and the experiences that get shared from those bi-weekly meetings have just been, or twice a week meetings have just been incredible. And I just feel like I'm on this path that's never going to end. And I'm just constantly learning and adding to my toolkit and understanding. So I'd say leading with humility is what I try to do these days. Thanks.
One thing I've really been trying to use is actually from Alex Bennett's book, Equity Centered Trauma Informed Instruction. She talks about these 4 principles of flexibility, predictability, connection, and empowerment. So I always, really think about those 4 tenets through, just the way I interact with kids, my everyday, tasks that I'm doing. Going back to like kind of what Megan and I think we're talking about in terms of the kind of the way the culture has been and the frustrations that we're feeling, it's, and Don, like to your point too, like, towing that fine line, because I view it like if I try to be as predictable in my response to those things, like, so I have the same conversations and reactions. So if I'm getting interrupted as if kids are interrupting each other, just because I feel like we are trying to build this culture of community, and where you should just respect and be curious about what somebody has to say in your community. And part of having respect for that is listening, and you can't listen to really understand if you're making the choice to disregard them by having your own conversations. So, I really tried to be super transparent about that, and just making sure that I'm consistent and predictable with my feedback to kids, whether it's about myself and how I'm feeling or what I'm seeing, kids interacting with each other. So that's one thing I really try to keep to the forefront, those 4 tenets, and that empowerment piece is huge. I think to Joe's point is making sure kids always have a say, and just like accepting feedback whenever you can. Like if kids are struggling behaviorally, behavior is communication. I think in approaching that with curiosity, instead of just saying like, you're doing this wrong, like let's fix it, like asking like, hey, what's going on, what can I do differently, like what do you need from me, and leading with those questions first opens up the door. So like they might say like, I just really didn't like this, or this is going on in my life that you didn't know about, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm really glad I approached this with curiosity and not judgment, and it changes the outcome every single time. So that's one thing, that typically helps to keep me grounded and get me through the days for sure.
Thank you, Kev. I think what I just love coming to this every month, because it's just so important to hear the different perspectives and the reminders, and sometimes I forget what I do. I don't know that what I'm doing is it's not that I forget, but I'm like, oh yeah, I am making choices about how I'm in relationship with kids, to sort of to highlight healthy practices. And just this week, or the last couple of weeks, I've just been trying to do, like, I start every class with 2 feet, 2 breaths. And I just kind of start and say, hey, let's just come in and sit and like, put 2 feet on the ground. You can stand, you can sit, and we're just going to take 2 breaths. And especially at the last class of the day, when the energy all of us are tired, we just feel sort of like refreshed, like, okay, we're here, we made it, we got to this place. I've been trying to be really predictable, like you were saying, Kev, about just posting as much information, reminders for kids, communicating with them in a way about, this is what you can anticipate is going to happen in class today, this is what we're working on. I've been putting up a timer and just trying to say, let's just crank for 15 minutes. Like, I just want you to like be really, just pay attention to where you're at and what you're working on, so that we can check in 15 minutes and be like, okay, where did we land? How far have we gotten? So I feel like those are some things that I'm just trying to be consistent about. We were talking today about a kiddo who's really can get quickly dysregulated, and this 5-point scale, and going over what the language might be for that. And it came up in the discussion, like, why isn't that 5-point scale available for all the kids? Like, why isn't that in the classroom, so that, all of us sometimes are in the red and the orange. I got quickly in the orange the other day, and I had to say to kids, look, my job is to sort of bring the energy down. And I didn't do that. I went right up here. And, we have those moments, and let's reset. Like, let's figure out what we need to do to reset. And it's that humility. It's that, like, okay, we're all tired, we're all like doing the best we can, and just trying to acknowledge that teachers are human too. We have moments that are require a little more patience and humility. So I think that's where I'm at.
Thank you, everybody. I think about this a lot when I have the time to think about it a lot. And I'm just going to bring this to a little bit of a broader sort of political context, because the broader political context, I think, wears on me. I don't know about heavily, but I think where I am, there's in Montpelier in 2020, an activist who we had on last year, Noel Ribby Williams, helped to paint the Black Lives Matter down State Street in Montpelier. And it was a beautiful moment, and it was an important moment. And Montpelier, I think, has been the first high school to raise the Black Lives Matter flag. And our middle school did the same thing. And I felt like, as Katie mentioned at the outset, that there was a lot of momentum behind, these ideas. And and innovation, and I thought it was really important. I also did, as part of the Middle Grades Institute, I interviewed Mike McCraith, who was the principal of Montpelier High School at the time the Black Lives Matter flag went up. And his experience that he shared in that interview was very, very interesting. And it was also very, very difficult to hear when he talked about sort of the response to that and how they had to call in law enforcement to sort of investigate a lot of the reaction to that. And in 2022 now, the Black Lives Matter has kind of worn off Main Street, right? And they haven't, nobody's, there's no, hey, let's paint it again because it's that important and it's happening all the time. And I feel like in some of the spaces that I'm operating in, that's a metaphor for maybe, oh, we're getting over the pandemic, we're trying to catch kids up, and some of the equity and some of the anti-racist stuff, that's not at the forefront of what we're focused on. And that, I think, is very troubling to me. And I also feel like if you, as many of us have acknowledged, if you ask the kids, they will respond. I've heard two responses that have been really important. One, in a class a couple months ago, we started talking about race, and kids were talking about when they've heard racial slurs, how early in their school career that was. And inevitably, it was in elementary school. And inevitably, it was somewhere close to or in proximity to the school, on the bus, on the playground. And they also talked about how teachers did not seem to be acting to eliminate that, or they were unaware of it. And then a second comment that happened actually just a few weeks ago was a student said that, and so I asked the kids, do you have these discussions everywhere in school, like in all your classes? And they were like, no, not really. And they stated that adults sometimes act like racism is something that happens out there or away from us and not right here in the school. And so, and then, as I mentioned, I often look at the broader political sphere, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but this weekend, and I looked this up, so I think it's authentic, but a chancellor from the University of Purdue Northwest was giving a speech, and as part of his speech, he broke into discriminatory and racial stereotypes of Asian language. And I saw it posted online. I was like, is this really true? And then he had to apologize. And I thought to myself about kids who are seeing adults still acting like this and still not being self-aware and still carrying these prejudices into our lives today. And I just, it just makes me think a lot about, what are we doing with kids in terms of having these conversations? And I know Katie Farber, who's often on this call, talks about kids know that it's going on and they see that it's going on. And if adults at school aren't talking about it, then it becomes a culture of silence. And so that's something that I think about quite often. And how do we have those discussions in a meaningful way when we seemingly are having trouble getting kids to listen to one another? And I can't imagine having one of these conversations and having it go sideways because of behavior and what harm that could possibly do, in addition to the other topics that we're discussing. So that's just something, I think about. Now, another question I have, and some of you have already mentioned responses to this, but I guess I wanted to know a little bit more about the resources that you're leaning on. I know Up for Learning has a racial justice dialogue. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And I'll kind of start. And one of the things that I look at a lot is Jeannie Phillips from the Tarrant Institute had an equity, literacy, and middle grades competency crosswalk that I think is a really important document because it poses a lot of these questions that might help educators to become more vigilant in their self-awareness. And so that's a tool that I use on a pretty regular basis. And I just wonder, what are some other tools or activities that you're involved with or that you know about that could assist other educators who are dealing with some of these same issues. And I'll turn it over to Katie.
Yeah, there's a lot that are coming to mind at the moment. I've already shared one in the chat. I think that another tool, well, honestly, like you said with the racial justice dialogue, so I think that it's not a tool, but it's definitely a resource. It's like these opportunities to get together with the young people and really dive into the hard conversations, and adults too. And in the racial justice dialogues that we do once a month, there's one next week on the 21st on Wednesday, and it's all facilitated by some of our youth up interns in Mississippi and Vermont, and now Connecticut too. And these youth just inspire me so much, and I learn so much in every single conversation. Next week we're actually talking about systemic inequities in schools, racial inequities in schools too. So just hearing like their words, hearing their experiences, and where the energy lies for change too. So I think that is like the pivotal space where I am learning resources, is creating curricular audits with we have a group actually at Williston Central School that we're working with who are considering developing a curriculum audit, and lots of just these amazing resources that the youth are developing in youth and adult partnership that are so tailored to the unique school district and the unique needs that are arising there. So my own learning, I tend to, it's now called Learning for Justice, that those articles like always inspire me a lot. And there are probably a lot more that I could list, but I think these really tailored projects that are aligned with schools developed in youth adult partnership are what's really inspiring. There's another one that I am excited about in Harwood Middle School, where they're going to actually teach, they're going to take books on racial justice and books on sexuality and gender, and go to the elementary schools to teach and to read these books with some of the elementary school students. So these kids are like taking it upon themselves to take this curriculum to the younger grades because they feel like they're in middle school and aren't talking about it enough. So just and Main Street Middle School too, there's a lot I could talk about there too. So just feeling like the resources that are created by the schools inevitably fill the need first and foremost in a really authentic way.
I guess I'd say two things. One, in the Connecticut River Valley here, Flow of History is an organization that does a lot of good work around place-based learning, and it also helps with including all voices when looking at the past. And I think it does a really nice job of continuing to examine what's gone on around here through lenses that tell different stories and tell stories of the diverse populations that are in this Connecticut River Valley. And it's a very strong and well-researched program. It's been around for probably 15 years anyway, and has a very good website and is very helpful. And I know that when we, as a school district, look through the offerings we have at the various levels, and we're looking through the lens of equity, the modules that we keep popping back to are those that have been created through the Flow of History lens. So, that has some real value to it, I think. And then just in the classroom, discussing current events. None of this stuff has gone away. It's right in our face every day. It's been really uh, interesting to discuss the World Cup and have young people talk about their views of the various countries that are participating. It gives us a chance to talk about the histories, the relationships that they've had through time, why it's such a big deal for Morocco to go against France. Why is it a form of patriotism for many, and how it's been controversial because so many folks from Morocco have moved to places like France in order to be able to survive economically, and just there's a lot of opportunity to talk about and listen and hear people's perspectives during just talking about current events and giving young people a chance to offer their ideas and then be able to ask them questions that might take them in places they might not think about otherwise.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. World Cup as curriculum. It's great. There's so much there. Looking at all the relationships of the countries. Yeah, I would echo what Katie said about the racial justice dialogues. Just as a monthly, I help Katie with the planning of those and the youth with the planning of those, and then the actual dialogue every month. And it's, yeah, I learned, as you said, Katie, I learned something every time. I just finished reading the Little Book of Race and Restorative Justice by Fania Davis, Angela Davis's sister. And it's just a remarkable book. And I'm new to restorative practice, working at UP, and I just found it so helpful in understanding can never learn enough about the history of race in our country. And it just uses this lens of restorative justice and talks also about the wins, the wins along the way that restorative justice has had. So that was a book that I found really impactful lately. Thanks.
Yeah, thinking about resources on my end. Obviously, Up for Learning is always a great resource to tap into, and we always appreciate their support with everything. I've found that in the past, like that Let's Talk has been a pretty valuable resource just to give some groundwork and framework around having some of the hard, these important and challenging conversations. Learning for Justice Standards. I know one thing my colleague and I are really trying to do, because we don't. It's funny, our social studies or humanities curriculum doesn't really have like a specific spine to it. It's like it's pretty arbitrary, honestly. It's like, what do you want to teach? Which is great because it gives us a chance to do a lot of social justice work, but at the same time, you're like, year to year, trying to come up with something new a little bit. But we've been looking a lot like the C3 framework, and then thinking about, all right, where can we work in some of these learning for justice standards into this work? And just kind of using those as the anchor, having conversations there. So that's been really helpful. These conversations are huge, and just like learning from other teachers. I know we've used, I know a lot of us know Kyle Chadburn, like some of his work that he's done around identity and work like that. I know he's not teaching anymore, but just pulling stuff from Twitter and people you trust that are that have resources that are vetted. I'm always scouring, the MGC crew and MGI crew, and just like, what are people doing in the classrooms now, and getting their feedback on it. And then, yeah, Joe, I'm so glad you brought up current events, because that wasn't really something I was thinking about, but every day, we watch CNN 10 as a group, and just hold space to have conversation around it. And it's always like, I know there's pushback in other places around it, but I don't know, for me, it's pretty objective. It's like, here's just what's happening in the world. And why I always encourage kids, like, we do a little reflection, like mention what was a topic, what's something you learned, and then what's your opinion or wondering about it. And that opens conversations too, because a lot of times they do bring up stuff that some kids might not be aware of. And I think it's important too, especially in our grade span being 5-8, so many more fifth graders and sixth graders now than ever before have devices, and they're getting this information anyway. And whether or not they're like having these conversations at home, like, if you're going to hear about some of these potentially scary events that are happening in the world, I'd rather have it come up in class, have us talk about it as a group and unpack anything, than you hear about it on your own and not know. So we luckily have not gotten like any negative feedback on our end from parents. Like, people are our families are pretty excited that we do that and keep kids up to speed on what's happening, give them a chance to think about it and reflect on it. So yeah, that's been an important resource for us too.
Yeah, I would echo what's been said about current events, and just as a humanities teacher, it is pretty broad. We do have like a lot of freedom to choose the direction that we want to go in. And so there's that like feeling of I feel this obligation to make sure that everything that we do has that lens, or my teammate and I, like our team feels very strongly that we address topics that are hard. Sometimes we have to put in place the building blocks in order to get to that next level, because we want to just make sure that we're practicing that. So I would say that the tools that we really emphasize, like listening to understand, we emphasize some of those communication skills, so that when even in just some classroom conversations, even just like having kids walk around the room to say strongly agree, disagree, just having those four corners always up, and just plopping a conversation into just about current events or about something that we're hearing about, keeps it present and keeps us practicing it every day. Like we just try to practice those skills all the time. For curriculum resources, I feel like I'm coming out of the pandemic a little bit like, oh, right, there's all these community partners around me that I didn't feel I could access before. And so partnering with Shelburne Farms, partnering with Vermont Folklife. I'm really excited about this unit on the most costly journey, because we're able to partner with them, getting kids out into the community, having them go to voting day and having them go to, so that they just see that they are part of a bigger picture. Joe, you were so helpful in just thinking about how do we find the stories of our town? How do we find the history of our town? And just having that sense of place. Where do we come from? So this year, more than ever, we've been able to get back out into the community. And I hope that continues. Yeah, that's it. And is it possible that the titles of some of those books, I don't know if I caught both of them, but Katie, you mentioned one, and Christy, could you, is that in that link there? Or can we just add those if you
Yeah.
got it or on the doc? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can add it.
Thank you, everybody. I think I did, Meg, write down a bunch of these different resources, some that I've forgotten about, but others that sound really interesting. And for me, I guess there's just this question of what makes a sustainable community. Because when I first took this position, we were thinking about sustainability, environmental, mostly economic. And now we're really focused on the three spheres of sustainability: environmental, economic, and then equity. And one of the things that we're questioning is who has access to opportunity, and who, which neighborhoods have access to clean water, clean air, and how has bias and discrimination and race played a part in all of that. And then the follow-up question is, what do we need to do to have a sustainable community where everybody has access to those opportunities, include, healthy food, a clean environment, opportunity for recreation. And also, when it comes to things like climate change, and you start looking at the data that shows how marginalized populations have been treated and how they're experiencing a very different sort of climate reality and will continue to do so. That's kind of a perspective that I never realized until I started teaching the subject. But for us, this idea of reduced inequalities and these questions about what makes a sustainable community are threaded through our through our curriculum so that we can have kids talking about it and thinking about it. And then I think having those discussions too, many of us talked about the skills needed for a really meaningful conversation. And I think continuing to instruct kids on what that looks like. And I think kids become more engaged when they are talking and listening about things that matter and that are really, important to their day-to-day existence. And for us, we're in Vermont. Obviously, there's mostly white kids that make up our populations. That doesn't lessen whatsoever the need to talk about race, but also these ideas about gender. I think discussions around gender and sexuality are, incredibly important as well, especially for our middle schoolers who are seeing a lot of things out there, hearing a lot of things out there, and also moving through their own experience. And so how do we respect that and support that and know that all are welcome? We are kind of closing in on this is the final webinar of 2022. And I guess I just want to end by saying, first of all, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to contribute. It's become a relative support group for me, and it's great to hear everybody's perspective. I also just want to remind folks that the middle grades review is coming out within the next week, and they are going to have specific articles about these issues, including, for example, looking at classroom texts and auditing those for bias. Also, how do you work with colleagues? And then finally, they'll have a specific article about when you do have these conversations or teach these topics, how do you prepare for blowback from the community? And what do you do to make sure that you're prepared for that? So just want to put a pump out there for the middle grades review. But the last question I have that'll bring us to a close is sort of what's something that you're hopeful about or hopeful for moving through your learning community or moving into the kind of the new year. And we'll just leave it at that. Again, something that you're hopeful for around this work that you'd like to see or you're working on? And we'll start with Katie.
I just feel hopeful and grateful that it's all happening. I'll pass.
Kevin talked about being part of a team, and when you asked that question, Don, that's what I thought about. What are we as a team, the folks I work with every day? What are we trying to do together, and what is the hope that we have, and what are we doing about it? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to be really intentional about knowing every student, and then in trying to progress with them through the couple years that we're together, trying to support them. And so what I'm hopeful about is that, again, even today in our meeting, we were making sure that we were trying to address the needs of all of the young people we work with. And so we're pushing back against systems that aren't really being responsive in the way that we would like. And we're continuing to do that. And I'm hopeful that the group of folks I'm with, we're going to continue doing that. And we're going to try to do the best for the young people that we have and give them as many options as they can have when they're with us. And let them all know that we're all pulling for them. And that's the hope, that we continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just working with the young people every day gives me hope with all of my teams. And the fact that, like with one team I'm working with, I have 2 returning students who were 7th graders last year, and now they're 8th graders, and they're facilitating, and just like watching their growth from kind of shy, reticent younger students to now like really stepping into leadership and having these hard conversations. That brings me hope. Yeah, the young people I get to work with every day really does. Thanks.
I think going off of that, Christy, we finally got our sustainability groups off the ground recently. It took us a little longer this year, but just seeing some of our 7th and 8th graders who have come out of their shell a little more and taken on more of a leadership role, and seeing the excitement that some of them have to continue with the groups that they had last year and get back in the communities and get going on the work. Like, I was like, all right, these kids are ready for this again and want this work. So that gave me a lot of hope for our work moving forward with kids, going out and seeing themselves as activists and making a difference.
This is hitting me as a big, like a big question, right? Because I, to be honest, I think every day we have to be hopeful. Otherwise, I don't know that we would show up for work. I mean, I do mean it like genuinely. Like we find the hope in every day. Like I feel like I have to, because if I don't, it would be a pretty tall order to kind of. So I guess I'm hopeful. Well, I'm hopeful for tomorrow because it's a snow day. But I am hopeful for, like, what's going to happen on Monday, and how are they going to do on this task that they're doing, and then what's our next unit going to be. I guess I'm sort of keeping my scope just in the day to day, in the moment to moment.
All right. Well, thank you all. My hope is Katie and Upper Learning have been helping me with a leadership group, and I've been thinking a lot about how that leadership could sort of diffuse out into the school. And one of the things that we started doing, a kid in our class actually helped us, or did, kind of create a volunteer program. And so now every quarter, we're hoping that every 8th grader in our class is going to be able to volunteer at the food pantry. And we've been doing that for 3 weeks now. So on Tuesdays, I go over with 2 or 3 kids, and then the person I'm partnering with today took 3 kids over there, and they go over for an hour. And I just think that's really an important thing. We have a little saying, feeling good by doing good. And we're just really trying to get kids to kind of realize that giving and being understanding and tolerant and understanding some of the difficult situations out there is really leads to empathy, and it leads to creativity. And I think it helps to make our community stronger. And that gives me a lot of hope. Just, it's so simple, but the kids really enjoy it. And I think it opens their eyes a little bit. And they also see that there's a lot of people in the community who care about them. And having a caring community, I think, is essential if we want to face and deal with some of these bigger issues. So that's something that gives me hope. I think I look forward to continuing that and doing the good work and supporting those kids, so that they can have those experiences that are really positive. Meg had to rub that in about the snow day one last time. Thanks for that, Meg. I'll be toiling away tomorrow, maybe, while you are all relaxing and enjoying your 3rd cups of coffee. But yeah, Meg, you have.
I just wanted to put 2 dates on the calendar, and one is the family conference in March. We're super excited about that. I don't have the date right in front of me, but I'll add it to the events doc.
The 14th. Yeah, March 14th.
March 14th. Thank you. And also just that this is the workshop that I'm attending in January. It's called Multiple Perspectives and Counter Narratives in Vermont's Food Systems, and it's run by Shelburne Farms in partnership with Vermont Historical Society. And I just think it's going to be a cool event. It's open to pre-K-12 educators.
Wait, is that's on January 19th, right?
It is, yeah.
And isn't that the Vermont Folklife Center is part of that too?
Yes, they are.
That's an awesome one. And don't forget, folks, also January 21st is the middle grades conference, which is happening at UVM. And we're hoping to see folks at that conference and maybe even have some students presenting. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic holiday season. For Kevin, this is the first with his expanded family, which is awesome. And I just want to, there he is, arms up in the air. He's excited.
It's so sweet. It's so sweet.
So again, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate this work. Our next, in the new year, our next webinar will be on January 19th. And until then, I wish you all the best with your family. I hope you have a wonderful holidays. Thanks so much for all you do. Take care, and we will talk to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.